Okay. And I think you're probably seeing my notes slide, so give me 1 second. Okay. Is everybody seeing the presentation mode now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. All right. Well, yeah, thank you so much for being here today, everybody. My name's Brittany Barker. I'm an assistant research professor, and I'm at the Oregon Integrated Pest Management Center, or IPM Center, at Oregon State University. And I'm also affiliated with the Department of Horticulture at OSU. And today, for the webinar series for Southeast Risk, I'll be presenting on phenological mapping of invasive insects, decision support for surveillance and management. And I appreciate your time being here. So, just to give a broad overview of my talk today, I'll start out by giving some basic definitions of what is phenology and why it's relevant to invasive species. After that, I'll present on how we can use data on the phenology of invasive species to create phenology models and also phenological maps, so these spatial phenology models. And I'll be focusing specifically on invasive insects and using the Asian longhorn beetle and the emerald ash borer as examples. And then third, how you can access, interpret, and apply these pest forecasts for decision support for surveillance and management. So, phenology is a scientific study of cyclical seasonal changes in the life cycles of plants and animals. So, for example, these seasonal events in nature, such as plant bud burst, flower blooming, or even animal migration, and how these are influenced by climate and other factors as well. So, you could have also biotic factors that influence phenology. These cartoons here are showing example life cycles of an insect and a plant. So I believe that the insect is a monarch butterfly, and so some major life stages would be like the adult butterfly that goes on to lay an egg, and then those eggs hatch into a larva. Pupation occurs in the chrysalis, and then the cycle starts over again. In the case of a plant, we could start out with the seed that germinates and then develops into a plant that grows. It could have bud burst and green leaves, and then it flowers, produces fruit, then releases the seeds, and then senesces, and then the cycle starts over again. And so the progression through these life cycles of all these species in the same ecosystem really influences the dynamics of that ecosystem. So think about, for example, all the insect species that depend on plants. So when those flowers are blooming, there's pollination occurs, and then animals are eating the fruit, insects are eating the fruit. So any disruption in the phenology can disrupt the ecosystem as a result. And temperature is the major driver of phenology. This is particularly true for ectotherms. So, an ectothermic organism is one that the common terminology or more popular terminology is that it's cold-blooded. And so an example is a snake. So a snake, like other ectotherms, has a body temperature that changes with the temperature of the environment. So if we look at a graph comparing the animal's internal temperature in degrees Celsius to the outside temperature in degrees Celsius, we see this linear relationship. And so in reality, for example, if you have a pet reptile like a lizard or a snake, you see that they exhibit behaviors where they can kind of escape the heat, or if they're cold, kind of like go to a place where they get more heat. But if we're ignoring those behaviors, we will see something like this direct relationship right here between outside and internal temperature. Okay, so using this like cartoon insect here, let's say that we're looking at some hypothetical bee species, just to demonstrate how temperature influences the developmental rate of the organism of that bee and therefore its phenology. So developmental rate is on the y-axis, specifically is 1 divided by the number of days. And then on the x-axis, we have the outside temperature, or in degrees Celsius. And these insects, like other ectotherms, have a lower developmental threshold and an upper developmental threshold. So when temperatures are very cold, so this particular bee species does not like temperatures below about 5 degrees Celsius, development shuts down. Once it gets too cold, too much cold stress accumulates, and then it will die. If like freeze to death, or potentially it starves because it can't develop, so it can't move around to find food. After the temperatures go above this lower threshold, development occurs, and in general, you see a more or less linear relationship, as I noted in the first slide, between developmental rate and temperature. At some point, however, the temperature gets too warm, so the upper developmental threshold for this bee species is about 25 degrees Celsius, And then development slows, it kind of plateaus. And then for most organisms, there's a pretty steep drop off. This like the cells in the body start to, the enzymes break down in the body, the cells start falling apart, and then there's too much heat stress accumulating, and the bee dies. So you see sticking its little tongue out down here. I thought these cartoons were kind of cute. Anyway, so other factors influence phenology. So if we're talking about other abiotic factors, moisture is a pretty big one. So many insects have life stages that are in the soil. So this picture right here, I can't remember what species this is, but you can see the little grubs in the soil here. And then when it starts raining, that combined with temperature is a trigger for many soil-dwelling pests to begin activities for the year. Plants obviously are very influenced by moisture. If we think about some of like the major invasive plants in the US, like maybe cheatgrass, I guess isn't so much a problem in the southeast, but it is in the western half of the US. That's a winter annual. So once the rains start in the fall and winter, growth, germination occurs and growth really starts to take off. Also, day length can be an important trigger or important factor that influences phenology. So this is particularly true in environments that are seasonal. So, for example, much of the U.S. has a seasonal environment where day lengths can vary throughout the year significantly. And so this can be a cue to be active versus dormant. So in the fall, when day lengths start getting shorter, that combined with declining temperature can be a trigger for some species to enter diapause, or insect species in particular to enter diapause. And then when temperatures start warming in the spring, day lengths become longer. That can be the cue to become active again and resume development. Biotic factors that influence phenology include the quantity and quality of the diet. So think about a pest that's eating different, like if it's a polyphagous pest, meaning it eats many different types of plants, some plants may be more nutritious than others, so development occurs quicker. Parasites and diseases can slow development. So this picture down here of a parasitoid stinging an aphid, you can imagine the baby parasitoids developing in that aphid is probably going to slow down development for the aphid. And also interspecific and intraspecific competition can also influence development. So phenology can vary over space. These maps down here are showing the Southeast US. So the Southeast risk region is with these green states right here. And if we compare that to a map of annual average temperature, some of the states are missing in this picture. I couldn't find one that like perfectly overlapped, but like you can see in Florida, average annual temperature tends to be is hottest compared to up here, we're getting into North Carolina. And I believe this is the southern part of the range of the Appalachian Mountains where it's more blue, so temperatures are cooler. So you would expect a pest that occurs across this entire range would exhibit faster development in Florida, assuming that the phenology is only driven by temperature. Phenology also varies significantly over time. So weather varies from year to year. You may know that if you're a gardener, like some years your tomatoes start growing really early in the season, you have a good tomato crop, other years it's cooler, and so it doesn't do quite so well. And development, of course, occurs faster during these warm years. And this is one major reason why the calendar date approach for pest management is unreliable, just because what happened last year, like the date when, for example, eggs hatched, it may be 2 or 3 weeks later during a cooler year. Also, in terms of rapid climate change, we have these warming temperatures that just keep getting warmer and warmer and warmer. So what happened 5 years ago is probably that phenological event is going to happen earlier due to this rapid climate change. These figures on the slide here are showing maps of NDVI, which is a metric of plant greenness in early July across 4 different years. So 2005, 2011, 2013, and 2015. And so the main point here is just to show you that like during probably like a hot and dry year in 2011 is what I'm guessing that was a pretty hot and dry year. Many of the plants in the southern US had already senesced, right? You see it's more brown compared to in 2005 where it's more green. So my guess would be that 2005 maybe had cooler temperatures or more moisture that year. Okay, so the relevance of phenology for invasive pests is that it can be really important for having better or more effective surveillance and management. So surveillance is when you're basically out scouting for the pest or you're hanging up traps to detect the pest. And surveillance often targets, well, it almost always targets the life stages that are more visible. So they're like easier to see or easier to catch. So if we think about wood-boring insects such as the emerald ash borer and also the Asian longhorn beetle, those species have immature life stages that are inside of the tree for most of their life cycle. So, like the larva, the egg, the pupae, they're inside the tree. So, unless you debark the tree and drill into it, you're not going to see those life stages. In contrast, the adult beetles are, in the case of the emerald ash borer, shiny and green. It's out like hanging out on the leaves. It can also be attracted to pheromone traps, right? So that is what we're targeting. And if we have early detection, if we know when to start searching for those adult beetles, we can detect them quickly and then therefore have a rapid response and eradicate that population before it begins spreading to additional areas. In terms of management, so let's say that you are wanting to eradicate a population, or maybe you have a population that you know you can't get rid of it, but you at least want to control it, like, reduce the size of the population. You need to have treatments that are well timed and other management tactics. So, for example, for the emerald ash borer, this picture down here where you see these tubes going into the tree, those are systemic insecticides that are getting injected into the trunk. And those insecticides, I'm actually not sure exactly what this picture, like what exactly that one is, but for some of these insecticides, they have to be put into the tree at least a 2 or 3 weeks before the adult beetles come out, because the adult beetles will be feeding on the leaves of the ash tree, and the chemical needs time to move through the tree to get up into those leaves. Also, the release of biological control agents or parasitoids for different insect pests. This is an example for emerald ash borer. I'm not sure which biocontrol agent that is, but they're like hanging a bunch of these containers that have the parasitoids in them. So those parasitoids often target a specific life stage, like the egg stage or the larval stage of an insect. So if you release the parasitoids at the wrong time of year, they're just going to die because they have no, the right life stage isn't there for them to attack. Okay, so early detection and rapid response helps us to avoid riskier interventions. And this slide is showing the Integrated Pest Management Pyramid, or IPM pyramid. You can see that it has four major levels. We have cultural at the bottom, then physical, mechanical, biological, and then the chemical aspect of the pyramid at the very top. So preventing an invasive species from establishing, that is like the ultimate, like best thing you can do, right? It hasn't caused any damage yet. You haven't spent that much money. You have traps out. And of course, like, trapping is, potentially can be expensive, but it's not as expensive as like buying all these pesticides, like trying to control this out of control species that's spreading everywhere. Some examples of cultural controls can also be like properly selecting and rotating crops, choosing the best planting and harvest times for your crops, or also maybe like putting up netting. If it's, for example, like a fly that's like a, I don't know, spotted ring Drosophila that's attacking your berries, you could put up some netting to prevent that. Physical and mechanical could be some examples of that could be tilling or manually pulling out a weed. And I think this biological aspect of the pyramid here could be like releasing biological control agents, or maybe like BT, like different biopesticides. And the chemical, those tend to get a little more risky. The toxicity is increasing, potentially more riskier for the environment and for human health. So we want to try to avoid those when we can. Okay, so now moving in, now they've introduced you to phenology and why it's important for invasive species. I'll talk about phenology models and how we can produce phenological maps to better understand when and where to expect these invasive species, focusing on insects. Okay, so many phenology models use degree days. And so not all of them, there are examples of statistical phenology models, but the ones that I'm talking about today are process-based, meaning they use information about the organism, so its heat requirements for development. A degree day is a unit of heat whereby temperature is integrated over time. So essentially, you are keeping track of heat accumulation over the time frame that you're modeling the species. Oftentimes, phenology models are run for the entire year, and so you're tracking degree day accumulations throughout the year. And a certain number of degree days are required to reach each life stage. So each species, there could be, if the species has a large range, there could be local adaptation in populations. So these numbers might vary somewhat, but in general, they'll be pretty similar within the species. That where, for example, this particular butterfly species in this cartoon here, 100 degree days are required for the eggs to hatch and for these little baby caterpillars to come out. And then another 400 degree days are required for it to develop into a big, fat, hungry caterpillar. So we have 500 degree days. And then at 800 degree days, the chrysalis forms. And then finally, at 1,000 degree days, the adult butterfly emerges and begins feeding and mating. All right, and then degree day accumulation, those occur between temperature thresholds. So, in addition for species having a certain number of degree day requirements for each life stage, they also have specific lower and upper thresholds for development. So, this plot right here is showing temperature in degrees Fahrenheit on the y-axis, and then on the x-axis, we have number of days. So, day 0 going to day 2. And this particular species has a lower threshold of 50 degrees Fahrenheit and an upper threshold of about 85 degrees Fahrenheit. So we start out in the nighttime, so it's like the middle of the night, temperature, oh, and the red line is temperature. And then temperatures rise above the 50-degree threshold sometime the next, going into the next day, into day 1. And you see here that these DD, that's degree days accumulate. Then we're getting into nighttime again. Temperatures are falling. It falls below the threshold, so they stop accumulating. And then we go into the next day and look at how many more. So there's actually more degree days accumulate on that next day because it was warmer that day. However, the temperatures in the afternoon most likely exceeded the upper threshold. So you see there's kind of this little peak here where no degree days have accumulated, and then the temperatures go back down again. Anyway, the main point here is that you can have more than one degree day, right? You can have many degree days accumulate within a 24-hour period. All right, so in a phenology model, you have your information about your species, you have temperature thresholds, the lower and upper threshold, you have the duration of the life stages in degree day units, and then you have your daily temperature data, so your minimum and maximum temperature for each day of the year, or whatever time frame you're modeling. And I'm using here emerald ash borer as an example. So in the daily time step of the phenology model, you are going to take your temperature for that day, minimum and maximum temperature. And if the minimum temperature is greater than or is equal to the lower threshold, degree days will accumulate. And also the maximum temperature has to be below or equal to that upper threshold. So degree days accumulate. And you do this over for example, for the whole year. And then the model will, once you reach those degree days accumulation that's required, for example, the overwintering J larva to pupate, right? Then they have this progression through the life cycle over the season. In the case of the emerald ash borer, the J larva, the OW means overwintering. It's kind of just a larva that's shaped like a J, which is why it's called that. And then the pupa come out sometime in the spring. The adults oviposit and feed, eggs hatch, the larvae form, and then they overwinter again. Or the life cycle starts over again. Unless emerald ash borer can have a 2-year life cycle in some cases, but that's going into a little too much detail. Okay, so the outputs of the phenology model are the dates of events. So if you're interested, for example, in the dates of adult emergence, that will be an output, maybe dates of end of adult activity, or dates of egg hatch, for example. Okay, so a spatial phenology model, if you want to produce maps, so if you want to do these predictions over an entire area, what you need to do is have gridded daily temperature data. So in this slide here, you see there's like a stack of, these are called rasters or gridded data, gridded daily temperature data, so T min and T max. And this is looks like for the Midwest, this particular region here. Then you have your model parameters. Those include the threshold and degree day requirements for, the events you're modeling, the life cycle stages. You do your modeling, your daily time step, and then the output is a map, a phenological map. In this example, it's a map of the first generation adults, so when they emerge. And in the case of this species, it was in the Midwest. This insect emerges sometime in June or July. And then with that information, you can have decision support for surveillance and management. Okay, so now I'm going to provide some more specific examples using invasive insects that are particularly problematic for the Southeast region in the United States, and also for the United States in general, right? But I'm focusing on the Asian longhorn beetle and emerald ash borer, which have both are present in parts of South Carolina and also the Southeast in general. Okay, so As I mentioned, I work at the Oregon IPM Center at OSU, so I just wanted to briefly tell you about what we do. The Oregon IPM Center promotes and supports integrated pest management for Oregon and the entire Northwest region, where we consider ourselves to be a hub of information regarding IPM research and extension activities in our region. We have a lot of educational materials and about invasive species, in addition to like more pests that have been, more widely established, and we know we can't get rid of them, so we want to provide tools and products to people that can help them have more sustainable management practices. And another thing that we offer is this decision support system called uspest.org that has different modeling tools, including phenology models that can help growers know when and where to act. So if you go to uspest.org /DD /underscore, or sorry, /model underscore app, you can find our site-based phenology models. And so these models are open access, right? So you don't have to pay for subscription. It's all free, which is great. We have a total of 144 models. These models are for crops, plant diseases, so like plant pathogens that cause diseases in plants, insects, including pests and invasive insects, different species of weeds. We have currently 28 invasive insect models, and we have over 40,000 weather stations. So that means you can run the phenology model from, thousands of different stations across the US, and we even have some for Canada. So when you go to this website, you can also scan the QR code here. You can access these forecasts for a single weather station. So what you do is you select the weather station that you want to produce, you want to run the model for, and then you get outputs in both tabular format and then also in a graph format. So this is our model for emerald ash borer. And when you look at the tabular results, you'll see on the first column is the date. And there's some information about like the weather that particular day and also how many degree days had accumulated. So notice on January 1st, that is when the model starts. And so there's 0 degree days have accumulated. So that's model start. And then as of June 24th, we see that first adult emergence is predicted to begin, right? So again, that's an important event for this species because the adults are targeted for surveillance. And then we see there's some additional dates here going into the summer where we have approximately like 10% adults have emerged, 50%, and first egg hatch is predicted to occur on July 29th. And I think I forgot to mention this is the model for 2024, but when you go to this yourself, it'll be using data for this year for 2025. So for the graph here, I know it's a little bit hard to see because the font's really small, but on the y-axis is degree days in Fahrenheit units. And on the x-axis is the date. So it's basically showing the same thing as the table, but in graphical format. And also you'll notice that there's different colored lines. And so the purple line is the data for this year, or like in this case, it was 2024. And notice we also have predictions for like 2023 and 2022. So you can kind of compare the phenology of the insect for this year compared to previous years. And we also have like a climate normal, so an average of 1981 to 2010 climate. So kind of comparing phenology to the long-term average. Okay, so moving into the spatial models, right now we have spatial phenology models for 18 invasive insects. We do plan to keep developing more, so stay tuned on that. These models can be accessed at uspest.org /CAPS, and you can also scan this QR code on the slide. Okay, so this is a table of all the different species that we have models for. And notice that the status in CONUS, so CONUS stands for the contiguous United States, notice that only 5 of those species are present in the US. So those include the emerald ash borer, Asian longhorn beetle, the light brown apple moth. So light brown apple moth has a limited distribution in California. Spotted lanternfly, I'm sure you're all familiar with that. It's becoming a huge problem on the East Coast. We're really worried about it in the West. And then the Japanese beetle, which is also really widespread in the East and has some isolated populations over on the West Coast as well. Many of these other species are not present. So just some examples like Japanese pine sawyer beetles, different tomato pests like the small tomato borer and Tuta absoluta, the tomato leaf miner. So the reason that we have models for these is that we were sharing our forecasts with APHIS PPQ. And so APHIS PPQ has a survey program called Cooperative Agricultural Pest Survey. And so they're going out and making sure that these species do not get here. So they're using our products to hopefully increase, surveillance efficacy and ensure that these really major pests don't arrive and establish in the United States. So when you go to this uspest.org CAPS website, you'll see that there is columns here. There's a table and there's thumbnails of some of the forecasts that are most relevant to surveillance and management of these species. So we're still working on this, on improving this, but we also have interactive maps for some of these forecasts. So in the first column, you'll see the name of the species, and then there's an abbreviation. If you click on the abbreviation, so Alb is Asian longhorn beetle, if you click on that, you'll access all of like the hundreds of different outputs that are produced by this model. There's image files, and then there's also gridded data or gridded predictions, so you can import them into your own GIS program. And then below that, we have model documentation. So there's like a spreadsheet that describes how we develop the model. And many of the species, I think 16 of them maybe, we have a technical white paper or a peer-reviewed publication that describe more thoroughly what the model is, how we developed it, and providing some example results. The remaining columns, like as I said, are thumbnails of some of these important phenological events. So first adult emergence is the second column, first egg hatch is the third column, and then in the fourth column, this is current stage and generations. So this one is if you walked outside today, what life stage would you likely see and what generation it would belong to? So for example, you might see if it's a emerald ash borer, probably in Oregon right now, they're probably laying eggs, so I'd probably be seeing first generation eggs or maybe first generation larvae. Yeah, and so and then the last column is showing number of generations per year. So if we produce the forecast out through December 31st, how many generations would that insect complete? The forecasts are updated every 1 to 2 days to stay current. Okay, so now I'm going to focus specifically on the Asian longhorn beetle and emerald ash borer. Okay, so here are some like very simple life cycle diagrams for both of these species. So both of these insects are wood-boring beetles. They're not closely related to each other, but because of like their life histories, they do have some commonalities in like their life cycle. So both of them have immature stages. So the egg, larva, and pupa are inside of the tree. Very hard to see, especially the larvae. They're very small. And both species overwinter as a larva. And it's that larval stage that really causes the most damage to the trees. So they feed on the phloem tissue of the tree host, and that tunneling and galleries cause stress to the tree and then dieback and then eventual death. At least in the United States, because these insects, one exception is the emerald ash borer. We are releasing parasitoids, but there's no tree that's like immune to these species. Well, at least the emerald ash borer. So they are very likely to kill the tree if the tree becomes infested. Okay, so the Asian longhorn beetle adult is very beautiful, black colored. I'll talk more about that in a second. The pupa kind of looks like a little mummy here, like a little caramel. I was listening to a YouTube video about Asian longhorn beetle, and they referred to it like a little caramel version of the adult. Um, Anyway, but yeah, so once the spring temperatures, once they're kind of warming up, is when we see these pupation occurring and then the adults emerging. Here, the emerald ash borer, they make a D-shaped exit hole. It kind of looks like a rotated upside down D. And then they come out and mate, lay their eggs, and then the cycle starts over again. Yeah, so I'll talk more about these in the next few slides. So focusing on the Asian longhorn beetle, they are native to Eastern Asia. From what I understand, they think the native range is Eastern China and also the Korean Peninsula. And this insect probably arrived to the US via wood packaging material from Asia. It was first found in Brooklyn, New York in 1996. The adults, as I mentioned, are this glossy black. They can get pretty big. I've never seen one myself, but probably, hopefully I won't in Oregon, where we don't think we have any Asian longhorn beetles. And so they can get about 0.66 to 1.5 inches long. They have white or yellow irregular spots on their smooth elytra, which are like these forewings right here. And each antenna has 11 segments, and you can see at the base of the antenna, there's kind of like this bluish hue. You can also sort of see that bluish hue in the legs as well. And let's see, the beetle is known as the starry sky beetle in parts of Asia. Part of that's because if you can see that it almost looks like a night sky with twinkling stars. And they can be detected on trees by the traces they leave. So this species leaves rather large exit holes that are circular, and you can apparently stick a pencil in it, and the pencil will go pretty deep. And so I've heard some people refer to the damage caused by Asian longhorn beetle as like Swiss cheesing the tree. And the maple trees are their primary hosts. They love maple. They will attack other hardwoods, including I think it's like buckeye, elm, is it willow? Right, poplar, birch. So they really love maple. And the tree will typically die within a few years after infestation. You can see this bottom left-hand corner here, that tree needs to be cut down, even though it's really sad to cut it down. So even though this tree looks alive, it's basically like a zombie. It's going to die within a few years. You can imagine how expensive it is to like cut down these huge maple trees. So if the Asian longhorn beetle spreads in the US, there's a potential for billions of dollars in economic damage. This is the current range of the Asian longhorn beetle. This map on the right-hand side is a little hard to see, but the one on the left is like all of the different detections of Asian longhorn beetle in the US, like, since it was first found. So in total, it's been found in 6 states. However, it has been eradicated from 2 of those. Currently, it's known to occur in New York, Massachusetts, Ohio, and South Carolina, and eradication efforts are underway. The 2 states it was eradicated from are Illinois and New Jersey. And I was reading that in South Carolina, there's an established population in Charleston County, and a new infestation was also recently found in Mount Pleasant, just like last month. This map off to the right here, the green polygons are where there. Oh, wait, no, the red polygons is where there's active federal quarantines. So that basically means that Aphis PPQ has really strict rules about moving firewood and also moving plant stock material. And one thing that I forgot to mention, but I do want to really highlight, is that it's critical to use locally sourced firewood, both for emerald ash borer and Asian longhorn beetle. That is one of the primary ways that these insects move, have these long distance jump dispersal events. Okay, so here is we're focusing in on a phenological map for Asian longhorn beetle for 2025, and this map was produced a few days ago. Okay, so kind of going back to what I was talking about, how much phenology can vary over space. So for Asian longhorn beetle, we see that emergence was predicted to occur as early as February down in Florida. If it's not in Florida, but if it were, that's when it would emerge pretty soon, pretty early in the year. And then as late as even the fall, like October, November, in some of these really high elevation or high latitude areas. Areas that are white are areas where the adults are never predicted to emerge. So those could potentially be areas where the tree host would be protected from Asian longhorn beetle. It may have difficulty establishing in those areas. And if we're focusing on southeast region of the United States, it looks like adult emergence occurs in like March, April, May, or potentially late as June in like the Appalachian Mountain region of the southeast. Okay, so what are the applications? Well, early detection of Asian longhorn beetle is very important. So there is some trapping that goes on to find the beetles. Common trap types include panel intercept traps and open top bucket traps, and they utilize slippery surfaces or funnel systems to cause the beetles to fall into a preservative fluid or a collection cup. This is a picture of somebody putting up one of those traps. Also, just like simple scouting activities. So, like you get your binoculars because these maples can get very large, right? So, you have your binoculars, you're looking for evidence of exit holes. And so, if you know when adults are expected to come out, you can make sure that you're out there using your binoculars looking for those exit holes. Also, for eradication efforts, there is insecticide treatments. Let's see if I can pronounce this right. It's called, I think the most common one that I understand that they use is imidacloprid. I hope I'm saying that right. I'm not sure. Imidacloprid. So those are applied before or when adults emerge. The picture here is showing a trunk injection and then also like a direct soil injection. And I think you can also do soil drenches with potentially with this pesticide as well. So those will be most effective if it's before or when the adults emerge. Okay, so the second species that is becoming more problematic in the southeastern US as well as other parts of the US is the emerald ash borer. So, EAB, emerald ash borer, is considered to be the most damaging forest pest in North America. It's known to be present in 37 US states and 6 Canadian provinces. It's native to East Asia. Millions of ash have been destroyed since it was first found in Michigan in 2002. All ash species are vulnerable. So in the United States, we have 16 species of ash. They're in the genus Fraxinus. And we also have many non-native ash that we plant in urban and suburban areas, as kind of just like along streets or in your yard. And you can see that the damage caused by these insects. This picture off to the left here is showing, I think they're debarking the tree looking for evidence of the presence of the insect. This is kind of a famous photo right here comparing June 2006 to June or August 2009. So within about 3 years after this infestation of EAB occurred, those trees along that road were completely dead. Typically, once a EAB is detected, it will be about 8 to 10 years before that stand has been, kind of just destroyed. Ash species, yeah, like I said, some have varying levels of resistance and are completely immune. On a positive note, we do have some biocontrol programs for EAB that are making a positive difference. So it's not all gloom and doom, but this is a very destructive pest that's causing both damage, like economic and also ecological damage. Like this is a riparian area where you can see all the dead trees here. So you can imagine all of the cascading impacts it has on those ecosystems. All right, this map is showing the counties where EAB is known to occur, where there's infestations. So the blue color are areas where it's been present for at least a few years. So as I mentioned, EAB was first detected in Michigan and from there began spreading in the Northeast and in the Midwest. The areas that are purple or kind of this reddish color are darker blue, purple, and brown. Those are where the most recent expansions have occurred. And so, as you can see, the beetle is expanding in the Midwest. For example, take a look at Minnesota. There's been a lot of recent infestations. Also, still in the Northeast. Not shown on the map are all the infestations in Canada, so that's just not shown on here. There's also been some really recent infestations in the South. So, for example, in Texas, I think it was first found in 2016, but you can see like how much it's expanded over the past few years. And then notice like in the Southeast here, like in North Carolina, we see recent expansions. And I'm in Oregon and EAB, so the Portland, Oregon area where I live, EAB has been spreading, which is really scary. I mean, we kind of knew it was going to get here, but it's still really, not good. Not it's kind of sucks. So and then just this summer, it's present, I think, in at least 4 or 5 counties now, and they just found some new populations this year. It was first found in the Portland area in 2020, I think 2022. Okay, so this map looks really similar to the one that I was showing you for Asian longhorn beetle. So we see again emergence occurring as early as February. If the EAB was found in Florida, that's where emergence would first occur. In the southeast, we see adults were predicted to emerge sometime in March or April. And over here in Oregon, so for us, our adults emerge closer to like the middle or late June. All right, so again, a lot of variation in the phenology across space. And this is a version of our model that is at the USA National Phenology Network. So the USA National Phenology Network has a suite of phenological maps. They call them pheno forecasts. And so we share our model with them and they kind of like they implement it, but they show the predictions a little bit differently. So it's the same prediction as I was showing you before, but notice how we're looking at it relative to the map issue date. So this map was produced on, what does it say? May 8th, 2025, right? So if you lived in Indianapolis or in Kansas City, you can see that adults would be predicted to emerge next week, right? And compared to up in the Portland, Oregon area where emergence wouldn't occur for at least a couple more months. And down here in the south, it had already occurred. It occurred like 2 or 3 months ago. All right, so one cool thing about the USA National Phenology Network is that they have this visualization tool that allows you to interact with the forecast. And so I'm going to play this video that kind of demonstrates that. So you go to this visualization tool. Wait, why isn't this playing? It's not working. Oh, there it goes. Okay. So you select a base layer. So we're going to select the pheno forecast and then select the species, emerald ash borer. And then we have forecasts for both the adults and also egg hatch. So first I'm selecting the forecast for the adults. And then I can zoom in. So in my case, like I said, I live in the Portland area. So I kind of am panning the map, going over to Portland, clicking on a pixel. So you can get a pixel. So that says June 24th. And I made this video in 2023. So then I'm going to go to egg hatch and go to that same general area. And then click on the pixel. And I see that it is about a few weeks later, I think. Yeah, August, well, yeah, monthly, August 2nd, 2023. So that's really cool. You can also at USA National Phenology Network sign up for notifications. So you can enter your email and then you'll receive an email of your pest that you're interested in 2 weeks in advance. And then again, 6 days in advance. So then you don't have to remember to constantly go back to their website and look at the forecast. You'll just get an alert in your email box. USA National Phenology Network also has learning modules, so you can learn about EAB and other pests. So you can see how comprehensive these are. It says like how to identify EAB, how does it spread, where's it located, so all sorts of useful information. And also they have a program called Nature's Notebook. And so people, both citizen scientists and researchers across the US are tracking changes in plant animal phenology and then entering their observations into a database. And I encourage you, if you're working on EAB or Asian longhorn beetle, these other pests, to enter your data there because these data could be useful to validate the models. So to see how well our forecasts are performing. And they also have a pest patrol program, so focusing on three key pests in the United States. Okay, so I kind of already mentioned this, some applications, so we can hang our traps in time for EAB. I have one of these purple prism traps hanging behind my house. They're sticky, they have a pheromone lure in them. Timely application of pesticides. We also have egg and larval parasitoids for EAB. Those include Oobius agrilli, which is an egg parasitoid, Spathius agrilli, Spathius galeni, and Tetrasticus planopenesi are three of the larval parasitoids. So those potentially, if we release them when the proper life stage is present, those programs could be more effective. So I don't really have time to convince you that our forecasts are performing well, but we have performed some validation analyses. I kind of wanted to just give a more anecdotal piece of evidence. The Oregon Department of Forestry has been using our model in their surveillance programs, and apparently over the last few years, our forecasts have been accurate to within a few days, which is really good news. I'm really happy about that. This map right here is showing for our 2024 trapping network, or the Oregon Department of Forestry's trapping network, and then compared to the forecast for this year for that pheno forecast. Okay, so takeaways of my talk today. I hope I showed you or demonstrated how phenological maps can be used to predict seasonal activities of pests across an area that you're interested in. The forecast can hopefully improve the timing of your surveillance and management activities. And the implications of having this improved timing, this increased effectiveness, is that you'll have more sustainable and productive ecosystems, greater agricultural production, more sustainable food supply, and overall increased agricultural or increased biosecurity in general. Another takeaway, even though I didn't talk about this really at all, is the fact that we really need to have these dynamic forecasts to deal with climate change. So climate change is really, it's not slowing down. We are already seeing evidence of earlier phenological events, generational increase, so like more generations per year. And that is bad for agriculture because that means you have a longer window of pest pressure. And also changing plant-insect interactions that could be disrupting ecosystems or at least like kind of shifting the ecosystems in a different direction. So this like plot over here, you may be familiar with the Keeling curve. So we've been tracking CO2 levels since 1958 in Mauna Loa. Right, so you can see it's almost exponential increase. So we really need to be using these predictive models because we really don't know, it's hard to predict based on the calendar approach what's going to happen. And yeah, with that, I'd like to thank you for your time and I'll take questions. And here again is some of the websites that I talked about. So uspest.org, our site-based models, spatial models. Also, I have a link here for USDA APHIS, their reporting system. You can report if you see the pest at this website. Yeah, so, and I'd like to acknowledge my funding sources and also my colleagues who were not here today at the National Phenology Network and also Oregon IPM Center who've helped me a lot with this work. So yeah, with that, I'd like to take questions.
I'm gonna hop on here. I
Okay.
do have everyone muted, so
Okay.
they might need to raise their hand, and then I'll unmute them. How's that? I'm also going to drop a few of the links here that Dr. Barker talked about, and I will also find the link, or maybe she can drop the link in for where to report these
Oh
species.
yeah. Yep.
So that's the only one I'm missing. So those links are in the chat. And if anybody has a question, just raise your hand and I'll unmute you, or Dr. Barker actually might have the power to do that as well. Well, I guess I'll go. Then, so yeah, that first of all, that was an amazing talk. The slides were great. The photos were really great too. Thanks for sharing everything you talked about. Um, I wonder with those with the phenological maps, is
Mhm.
anyone using those to track the phenology of non-pest species, perhaps even phenological mismatch between plants and insect species or endangered species?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the answer is yes, but I don't really know of like a decision support system like that has multiple types of those models. I feel like I've read papers where they like looking at certain species and producing phenological maps and also like projecting how the phenology may change under different climate scenarios. I don't necessarily have like a specific website to refer you to, but yes, it is being done. And it is something too that I'm interested in, like especially if I could find some collaborators and there's like a funding source, it would be a really neat project or a very worthwhile endeavor, I think, to understand how, yeah, these endangered species or native species, how interactions may change and yeah, how their phenology will change in the future. Mhm.
Yeah, it was very for me, I just had lots of ideas going while you were showing us the map. So I hope that
Yeah,
inspired other folks too to think about the phenology of the species that they study and how they may
yeah,
be impacted by climate change.
yeah,
And so I had one other question. The emerald ash borer population in Portland that you showed
yeah,
us.
yeah.
How did they get there? They're so disjunct, so they obviously didn't spread.
Hmm.
Do you know the pathway?
I don't know if we know. So kind of the interesting thing is that the person who found the population, he was actually like picking up his kid from like summer camp. It was at a school. So it's just like kind of at a random spot, like at a school in Forest Grove. And I don't know if they know how it got there. If I had to guess, it would probably be firewood. Not positive, but yeah, we don't know. But it's kind of scary though because well, I don't know about scary. I guess it's not too surprising, but they found one population last year. It looked like it had been there probably at least 5 years, right? And so it had just gone undetected. And so because I think they knew that by like how large the infestation was, like it had kind of spread up the river a little bit. Yeah, but we don't know. Probably if we did genetic work, we might be able to figure it out. And I
Oh,
don't know
that's
if
a
any,
great point. You could
yeah,
find the
and I
source
don't,
population.
yeah, and I don't
Yeah.
know. I'm not sure if someone's working on that or not, but that would be like my thought would be to do that. Oh, it looks
Okay.
like
Yes.
Henrique has their
I'm
hand.
gonna try to unmute you, Henrique. There, I think we can hear you now. You want to ask your question?
Hello. Uh, Thank you for the talk. It was really, really great. I was wondering about um, the application of degree day models in for some circumstances. I know spraying is a pretty common one, but after spraying, how
Mhm,
do you think degree day models are most impactful in IPM uh,
mhm.
tactics?
Okay. Yeah, I think, well, it depends what pests you're working on, but I mean, a lot of pests are active into the summer. So, as I was mentioning, like in the case of emerald ash borer and Asian longhorn beetle, detecting those adults is really critical for surveillance. But if you're managing, let's say that you're working on a pest that has multiple generations per year, and then you also, like, let's say that their larvae are susceptible to a pesticide. So it could be in the summer, you could have maybe 2 or 3 generations. So you really need, and then you want to know when the eggs are going to hatch. And so that would be an example of when understanding what's going on in the summer could be important for management. Yeah, so it really depends what species you're working on and how many generations they have. Let me see. I think also like an example I gave for emerald ash borers, there's an egg parasitoid called the Obius agrilli. And so that one would, you'd want to release it when the eggs are going to be present. And depending on where you are in the US, it could, like in Portland area, it's like not until August when the eggs would be laid. And so that's another example where the summer predictions or predictions for the summer would be useful.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah.
And we have a question in the comments from Emmanuel.
Mhm.
His question is, can these models be used to predict pest infestation in a particular location even before they emerge?
Well, yeah, I think that if you're in a spot where is likely to be suitable for establishment, and that's actually one thing I did not talk about with our models. Those spatial models I was showing you, we also have estimates of establishment risk. I just didn't focus on it in the talk today. But if you know you're in a high risk area, you could definitely go out and start scouting, for example, like the immature stages. So you could do like drill in the case of a wood boring insect, go in and try to look inside the tree, kind of do some tree dissections. And let's see. So the question was detect infestation before you find it. Yeah, I would just say that if you know there's other life stages that are supposed to be present according to your model, that you could go search for those before like the adults come out and start more visible. Um, yeah, right. So, the one thing these models are not doing though, they're not predicting the spread. So they help you. It's not a movement model, right? So this is just like kind of one type of model that may be useful for decision support. You also want to look at like models of spread, economic models, economic impact models, other types of establishment risk models. So all those together really help you, I think, to detect uh, the invasive species and the potential what could become an infestation.
Thank you. And you said there are habitat suitability. That's not the phrasing you used, but there are habitat suitability models. And can we find those in the link on
Yeah, yeah,
uspest.org?
yeah. I actually have some extra slides here too I could show you. So if you go to the spatial phenology model website at uspest.org, you'll notice that on those maps, and I can also just share my screen again really quick and show you. Let me see. Okay, so like here, are you seeing the website?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to scroll over to the end of my presentation to some slides. So our models actually integrate heat. So I mentioned like cold stress and heat stress early on in my talk, and how that that can limit the survival of these these pests or the ectotherms in general. So our models incorporate that. So you'll see those are the gray colors. So this dark gray and light gray. Those are areas that are predicted to be either too cold or too hot for establishment. So we have maps where you can just look at phenology, but you can also look at the integrated maps that have the climate suitability. So these areas that are too cold, especially the dark gray, where it's like severe cold stress or severe hot stress, those are going to be areas where the pest is unlikely to survive, at least based on the climate data for that year. So yeah, and I just didn't talk about it too much, but that's just another way. So that's kind of a unique thing about the US pest spatial models is the fact that we integrate the mapping of climate suitability and phenology. Yeah.
Great. I think that probably covered Emmanuel's question and more. Thank you
Yeah,
for
of
that
course.
information.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions before we end our talk today? Well, thank you so much, Dr. Oh, wait, have you, Dan has asked, have you ever tried working with insect phenology in tropical environments where
Hmm.
insects have multiple generations in each year?
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think that it's actually interesting because I was talking with the group, the risk group over like in the Pacific Islands, like Hawaii and the other Pacific Islands. And like they're interested in these forecasts, but yeah, sometimes it's a little hard because the pests may not have an overwinter, they may not even really overwinter, right? So I think it may be that these models potentially might need to be calibrated for these different areas. And I haven't actually done it myself, so I have not. Some of the species that we work on do occur in tropical areas, and we haven't really validated them very well for these areas though, because there's not a lot of it's kind of actually hard to find monitoring data that we can use for model validation for some of these species. So I would say that the answer kind of is no, but I would suspect that it could be a problem for some of these species that don't really overwinter because it's just the temperatures are so mild, they may not have a clear overwintering phase. Yeah, but I think there's potential. It just might be that we need to adjust the models, potentially depending on the species.
Thank you. Yeah, that
Mhm.
sounds like that's difficult um, to try to predict in areas where it's tropical. Emmanuel asked if we will be recording this session, and yes, I did record it, and it will be on YouTube, hopefully by the end of the day, but if not, look for it tomorrow. Um, and if there are no other questions, give one more
Yeah.
second.
Can I say one more thing about the tropics? I just wanted to mention that they still could be useful for like elevation. So, like for example, in Hawaii, there's quite a bit of an elevational gradient. So I think the model could still be useful for there. Anyway, I just wanted to mention that quickly, that there's still uses for these phenology models in the tropics because there's obviously still climate variation in the tropics. Okay, that's all.
Yeah, great point. No, we have a couple minutes, so definitely anything else you wanted to add? I know that I feel like you could probably go over the website and all the maps and everything that you all do for a really long time, but we're really happy that you could talk about what you did for us today because I think
No problem.
phenology is a really important topic when we're talking about invasive species and climate change, and it's going to be something that I think a lot of people have to start thinking about and considering if they're not. And so thank you very much for your time today,
Yeah,
Dr. Barker. Check
yeah.
out the chat for those links to those websites that Dr. Barker shared with us today. I will also share those on YouTube. And anyone has any other questions, feel free to reach out and check out our website to look for the link to this recorded talk.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. Feel free to email me if you have questions or comments. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Bye bye, everyone.
Bye. Thanks, Kayla.